Welcome to what I know is about to be a really fun episode of Made Possible by Pop Culture, the podcast. I'm Danielle, and for years I was living by the Jonathan Larson lyric, I want to sit down right now at my piano and write a song that people will listen to and remember, and I want to do the same thing every morning for the rest of my life. Except I was writing scripts and novels, not songs or music. And then my life took a turn, and I was writing TV reviews and listicles and interviews with actors, writers, producers, and more, many of which you might remember were about the show Supernatural. And then my life took another turn, and honestly, I was just sick of reading my own voice. But this isn't about me, it's about my guests. And today's guest is the perfect person to talk to about writing because she's been in charge of big and buzzy shows, including Supernatural, but also The Magicians, Aquarius, and You. She also spent years answering questions on social media about writing and the entertainment business, and now she has taken all of that passion and knowledge and turned it into a Substack. It will likely make all of you want to write, or at least inspire those of you who already do to keep going. Definitely subscribe today. We're going to get into an early pop culture influence for her, of course, and a lot of the above, and probably some other things. We'll see how it goes. But I buried the lead, so it's probably a good thing I'm not working as an entertainment editor right now. Please welcome Sera Gamble.
Hello.
Hello. Well, thank you for coming on and coming on so hot on the heels of your last podcast after I heard you don't do a lot of podcasts. So that's exciting.
When I do them right in a row, and then
Right.
I disappear for years.
Right. Which makes sense because I mean, when you're working on a show, there's no time.
hmm Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Well, so the last podcast you were on was a Supernatural, Robin Rich's Supernatural Then and Now podcast. And
hmm
you talked about a lot of things on there that we're not going to make you repeat here for anyone who is listening that is a Supernatural fan. I might have a couple questions about the show later, but like that's really the episode to listen to hear the Supernatural experience because this podcast is about pop culture in a broader way.
hmm
And I want to jump right in with you to talk about your past pop culture influence to kind of set up for those who are fans of your writing, kind of how you maybe got there through an influence that you had.
hmm
I will say for the audience, I'm going to read this. When we were talking about Sarah coming on, she said, I want to, we were talking about different things that maybe we would discuss on the show. And she said, a slightly dangerous one that popped right to mind, just in that it's widely derided by critics. But you also called it seminal for you. And I was like,
hmm
that one, pick that one. And I didn't know what it was at the time, but I
Uh-huh.
picked that one. So, first, obviously, set up what it is, and then set up what made it seminal. And then we'll go from there.
Yes. The film that popped immediately to mind was a Tarsem Singh film. Jennifer Lopez stars in it. It's called The Cell.
Mhm.
It's like in certain ways, a quintessential late 90s. It came out in 2000. So late 90s serial killer movie. There were a lot of them then. But it's also this incredible dreamscape film. In that the twist, the high concept is that there's a technology where you can enter other people's dreams and unconscious minds. And if you are at all familiar with my work on Supernatural or The Magicians, or you're really, I
Right.
have never met a show I could not turn into a hallucinatory dream sequence. And I do think that this film is part of why.
But I also don't imagine that when you first saw this film, that was in your head, like, I'm going to borrow some of those techniques, or I like that idea. I'm going to make that part of my wheelhouse.
I
So,
mean,
oh, yeah,
I think I
okay.
saw it in the theaters, and this was before I became a TV writer. So you need to kind of just imagine like a dirtbag in a crop top rolling in half asleep for the matinee and Van Nuys, because that's probably what happened.
Well, that's what I was getting at. Like, it was a different time. And like a
hmm
lot of what maybe seeped in was maybe an unconscious desire to be that kind of writer. But I am curious about when you are sitting down for that first viewing, what was the thing that captured you first going into the film? Did you know it was going to be that vibe going in? I honestly don't remember the trailer, so I can't speak for whether or not they were really keen on marketing it to what it really was.
I mean, I went on YouTube and there were two trailers. First of all, trailers are wild from
Yeah,
that era.
well,
Just our taste has changed a lot. They are slow, they look corny, but I don't know. All I can say is like they looked really cool to us when we were young and we were seeing them. So I saw one trailer that was primarily the procedural version of the story. There's a
Yeah.
cop, he's found a serial killer, there's a clock to find a captured woman who's locked up somewhere, and oh, the serial killer has an aneurysm or something. And so, Jennifer Lopez, the incredibly empathic child psychologist, has to put on this crazy suit to go into his mind, right? But it is mostly about like the serial killer of it all and like the girl locked in a cage. And then there's a Red Band trailer. Do those still
Mm.
exist?
I don't think we do them anymore because we don't need to because our standards are changed. Like we can just do maybe it's a slightly longer version for the internet, but like what we can put in a trailer now is different from what you could put in a trailer then. So,
Right. So when Danielle and I were children, there was
yeah,
this thing
exactly.
called a Red Band trailer, which was the cool version because it would have the rated R
Yeah.
vibes. And that one was like, check out what this fucker did. I mean, it
Okay.
is so beautiful. And this is the thing, like it is both that had you seen it
So
before?
I will say that when this came up in what we would talk about, I hadn't seen it yet. I don't know. I said in our email, I don't know how it missed me because I loved serial killer stuff for
Mm-hmm.
ever since I was like allowed to not even, let's not even say allowed. Before I was allowed to start reading and watching those things, I was reading and watching those things. And somehow I hadn't seen it in 2000. I did rent it so that we could talk about this in detail before you came on. And I do feel like maybe I had seen part of it. Like maybe I
Mm-hmm.
was at a friend's house in college and they put it on and I was like, what is this? And didn't stay for the whole movie because I will say that when the opening comes and it's Jennifer Lopez on a horse in a desert, and I was
It's
like,
slow.
it's slow and it's like, what is this? And I feel like I had seen that before and been like, this isn't what I wanted and turned it off. But then when you understand that the opening sequence is, as you said, like a dreamscape, she's in this child's mind because she's working with this kid in a coma to try to like bring him back and
Mm-hmm.
understand like his fears and his nightmares and stuff. That I was very interested in. And I was then knowing where it was going, that she was going to work with a serial killer that way. Then I was like, oh, yes, I'm very interested in this. Some of the like visuals are crazy to me. And I think I don't know if I needed the craziness, like the sci-fi of it. But what I really liked about it was like they went there. You know, they were like, we're not going to be the serial killer movie that everybody else is doing.
I mean, to me, those dream sequences, first of all, I found because I rewatched this to have this conversation, and I think they hold up. Like those dream
Yeah. Oh, I think
sequences
so too.
are
Yeah.
gorgeous. And at the time, it's also interesting because our eye for VFX has improved in the last
Hmm.
20, 25 years. So I see a little bit more where the handshake is than I did. It was just magic to me at the time. I
Hmm.
couldn't detect any of it back then. And I do think it on that level it holds up. I mean, I have been telling every writer's room to watch the movie, and I always get this look. See, this is why I said dangerous because
No, 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 no. I think it makes sense for the shows that you work on. Like
uh
hearing you say that, I'm like, oh, sure. I just went through the catalog in my mind. I'm like, you're playing with these themes, you're playing with these genres. That makes sense. I know you've worked on physical. I can't imagine you said that to that group of
no,
people.
no, 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 no,
Okay.
no.
Okay.
But I mean, first of all, like the reason I was like, okay, this is my honest answer, and also it'll be like slightly more challenging to talk about, is only because I'm not, you know, when I think about people making art, I don't want to come on your podcast and talk about anything I don't like. Do you know what I mean? I'm
Oh,
not
of
here to
course
talk
not.
shit. And
No, that's not
I
what
like,
we want to do here either. Sometimes people put
yeah,
things that I don't love and then I struggle, but like I struggle in the sense of I want to sound curious, not abrasive. So
right.
I
And I
get it.
think it has been easy for the last quarter century to somehow dismiss this film. I think that the
Mm,
procedural beats feel straight out of it feels a little at times I think a bit like two different movies.
yeah.
I do think the critique is valid. I also think Jennifer Lopez's vibe it has like her iconic status in society has evolved to where she makes less sense to us now as this actress.
Mm.
I think at the time she fit into a film like that, but now we're like, she's a pop star. What is she doing in that little boy's dream? But when all of that to say, when I bring it up in a writer's room, oftentimes they're like, why are you telling us to watch like a B movie from the
Oh,
90s?
I
Like, isn't that
see.
movie bad? And I'm like, it's really not. How dare you? And then they come back, and it's usually a fairly even split in the room. There are people who are like politely trying not to tell their boss they think their taste is whack. And then the other half are like, holy shit, that just blew my mind. So I think in watching it again, the thing that I would say is that like I also went back and looked at some of the reviews because it was
Hmm.
critically panned.
Well, but to be
Um,
fair, I also think like you set it up perfectly. Like if the trailer was focusing a lot on the procedural beats, they don't know what they're getting into when they then go into this movie to review it. That's been one of my biggest gripes this whole time, my entire career and before my career of just like you're not positioning this well for the audience or for the critic. They need
mhm.
to know what they're getting into, A, to assign the right person to it if they were talking critics and writers and whatever, but B, like you want them to be surprised, but not blindsided.
I completely agree. I also think that because I think maybe some of the critics came in that way, they were like, these visuals are random. This is a former music video director who is
Right. And this was
has
his
a
first
big
movie. So that's the whole thing. Like I think he set a really very strong calling card with the visuals in this movie. But I do think that maybe people weren't
mhm.
ready for it. Maybe let's say it that way nicely.
Yeah, and the where I really want to stand up and defend it is when people say, I don't know, those visuals were just to have beautiful visuals or creepy
Oh,
visuals. Like they didn't really connect. That was a common criticism. And I'm like, no, I just rewatched it and every single thing in the frame makes perfect sense to me.
right.
And so long story short, that's why it has influenced me so much.
Mm.
I love stuff that goes into the unconscious, like Eternal Sunshine, top 5 film of all
Hmm.
time, right? And this one is the horror, the
Right.
beautiful, gorgeous, sort of painterly horror version of that. And it's like what happens when you go into the mind of somebody who's just like incredibly fucked up, which
Mhm.
I want to do.
You have to want to be in that place, and it's a dark and creepy place, and it's
I want to be in dark and creepy. You know that I
yeah,
do.
but that's what I mean. Like those visuals are for some people, they're gonna say, "Hey, I don't want to see what I'm seeing. I don't want to know that." You know, I will say the only scene where I was like, "I don't know that we needed what came after it," but we already know that Vincent D'Onofrio is playing this like, well, he's schizophrenic, but he's a terrible person who is kidnapping women and putting them in these cages that he's filling with water.
Yeah.
We after we already learned that, we then see him in a tub and there's no bubbles. Who takes a bath with no bubbles? Like we already
Serial
know you're a
killers.
nutcase. We don't need I was like that might be a little extra that I didn't need, but then we need what comes after it because that's when he like collapses and they capture him. So,
One thing that might help people who decide that they want to go watch this is to know that this film is still influenced by a grunge aesthetic that has gone
mhm,
the way of other old timey aesthetics. And so when you were making a film that had dark and gritty content, it was a thing where you would put a character in a dirty bathtub. There's a lot of those. And then
that's
that has
true.
happily gone out of style. I mean, I'm enough of a germaphobe that grosses me out every single time. I mean, I even think it's funny. It's like anytime you go back and you revisit something that really hit you hard when you were very young, it's
Mhm.
like it is a time capsule. I think
Yeah.
we demand, at least I demand, more insight into what makes people do what they do. But I think for the time, just
Mhm.
going, we've seen 25 films with like all of the big, like Ashley Judd type stars of the era.
Right.
And all of them like stand in front of a whiteboard and they tell the police what the psychology is and why. But this time we're going to go in and we're going to viscerally feel how like a little boy, right? But I think we've done that now. So if we were going to make that movie today, which I'm not going to lie, I kind of want to make it.
I mean, you would have to make it very different
I mean,
though.
I kind of made it actually as a TV show. I think
We
you
weren't
has a lot.
literally
Yeah.
I mean, like there were episodes of Supernatural where we were literally in people's minds, but I mean, I would
Mhm.
argue with you, we weren't literally in his mind.
Occasionally we went there. Occasionally we would
Well,
like there was a
the last time you and I talked, when then I was laid off and couldn't use the story, when his mind's fractured, for sure,
yes.
for
Right,
sure.
that whole
I just
season.
mean like
Yeah.
lit like I guess what I feel like it is a split just in the sense of we're still living in the outside world. We're just living with him and his
Yes.
perspective. Whereas in this film, The Cell, like she's literally walking in his mind, and there's, little version of Carl the killer with big version of Carl the killer. He turns into a demon. Like that's not something that would happen in our
Huh.
real world.
Right. Yes. So what happens when I'm, like for example, when I was working on you, and this is I wouldn't say it's like, guys, let's talk about the 2000 film to sell right now. It's just it's always on my bucket list for every
Everybody
show.
needs homework. I think that's fine to
It's
give
on the
them
whole for
homework.
sure. I actually do this before every season starts. I send a welcome email that is full of homework
Okay,
and
great.
the books and films that would be helpful that inspired me. And by and large, writers are good students and they want the homework. They want to come in with the references kind of under their belt. Um, whether it was in the room on Supernatural, I feel like I was pitching this before I ran the show, where I was like, why don't we do something fucked up to Sam Winchester? So then he's like locked in a room in an insane asylum and he's hallucinating and he doesn't know what's real. With Joe
Right.
Goldberg, we spiked his drink. So he was on acid. We gave him a high fever when he contracted measles and
Hmm.
he was seeing his own doppelganger. And I will always find a way to have that prep meeting where they're like, Sarah, the camera head that they use in Orphan Black is kind of expensive to rent. Are you sure? I'm like, yes, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's worth it. It's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you get to know the characters very well. And I think, like, to your point where you were saying all of these previous or similar serial killer movies used to use the person standing at the whiteboard, like that's we're telling the story, we're not showing the story. And we
Yeah.
all don't want that. And I don't know how we felt in 2000. I didn't want that in 2000. It seems like a lot of people in Hollywood did. But I think even if we did want that then, we've moved
Mm-hmm.
past it now. And so, like, if you're going to say this is a very complex character, complex psychology, or even simply like a moment to react to, it feels, I think, better to put the audience in the point of view of that person and like take them through their journey.
The the in, the internal logic of our minds and our psyches, it doesn't work in the same linear way that scenes in the outside world do. And so it's a completely different writing challenge. It's a completely different filming challenge. And I think, at least for me, I'd be curious to know if this like hits the spot for you. But when
Mm.
I'm watching something that's dreamlike and it somehow hits it correctly, where I'm like, oh, this is how that works. Oh, this feels right. Even though it's, there's a random little moment in the film where the other cop, played by Vince Vaughn,
Yeah, I
like
was going to ask
lands
you
in
how
the
you felt
dream
about Vince, but yeah.
and there's these three women posed on a sand dune. They look like Japanese Buto dancers. And each of them says a line that's a different fractured thing that came out of the mouth of the mother of the killer. And there's something about that, like twinning, tripleting,
Mm.
the fracturing of the archetypal figures in your mind, the mother figure, all of that. It just pings something inside me where I recognize it. And I'm like, oh, this person has captured in a beautiful, because I think it's visually stunning. I think it's worth saying there's some dirty bathwater stuff in this film, but there's also moments that are just so gorgeous. The
Yeah.
same the same costume designer who did the Dracula that stars
Mhm.
Gary Oldman and Winona Ryder, Eiko Ishioka, I think is how you say her name. You could tell she designed the
Yeah.
costumes because they have that like Twizzler, same as like Dracula's. So like that, I was just watching it on my TV. It wasn't even in the theater the other
Mhm.
day, and there was a close up on the demonic version
Mhm.
of him, and I could see every sequin
Yes.
on his coat, and I was like, "Well, this is just gorgeous." I don't think I could stand it if it was all really very grotty, like a
Mm.
rest stop bathroom vibe. But because there are so many, I mean, things taken from classical paintings and
Yeah.
gore, like the color saturation back when they shot on film is just so
Yeah, but
yummy.
that's also what I was thinking when I was saying if you were to do this today, you'd have to do it very differently. I think you would have to do the like dirty, dark, like horrible version today. I don't know that you could make it beautiful because he is still a terrible person. And
Mm-hmm.
we're not trying, and like they were not trying to romanticize him at all. But I do feel like today there is a little bit more of a black and white sometimes for some audiences of like if we're in his mind, it needs to be bad in there at all times.
Yeah.
And sometimes the badness it's not as nuanced or it's not as subtle sometimes. Not that I don't want it to be nuanced or subtle. I just think that it like doesn't work for certain people. And so people who make these films shy away from it.
I think like a couple of things about that are very true. One, we experience this on You. They do this, we explored his childhood.
Yeah.
We explored his traumas. We explored when Joe Goldberg was the innocent person being
Yeah.
abused. And that as a concept has become more controversial in the year since the year
Hmm.
2000, where people have a stronger reaction to they're more aware of the line between humanizing someone who's doing terrible things and in some way romanticizing them. And that was a pretty constant refrain in the criticism of You, was like, why are we centering on this person and why are we giving him redeeming quality, or, this kind of
Yeah, no,
backstory?
I only laughed because I'm like, that's the whole point of the show.
Yeah.
Is like for you to say, like, we do this though. We romanticize killers all the time. There are people in prison that get letters, that get married. Like it's real. And
Yes.
so, and I think that's also, I know you weren't show running the final season, but like
Mm-hmm.
the end of that show being like, well, we didn't kill him. We left him in prison where people are still like, I love you to him. And like,
Uh-huh.
isn't that the problem? Like, literally pointing the finger back and being like, hello, were you not listening all 5 seasons?
I mean, I had this conversation with them. First of all, we chatted before they wrote the last
Of
episode,
course.
but
Yeah.
from the very beginning, because Penn Badgley was very interested in, like, what are you going to do at the end? Are you going to punish this guy because he is on the side of good as an actor?
Yeah.
And over the years, we talked about so many things that would feel delightful if we did it to him, if he got busted, if all kinds of things. And anytime I would think deeply about it, I would be like, but the guys like this, they get away with a lot.
Yeah.
The truth is that the uncomfortable truth, the truth that we're trying to illuminate by making the show at all, is that probably he gets away with it. Probably he doesn't learn his lesson. And
Well,
yes,
those
I
are two
feel it.
very different things, I think, though. Getting away
Yeah.
with it and learning a lesson, like he is caught. So he didn't
Uh-huh.
technically get away with it, but I don't think he learned his lesson. You know what I mean? Like
I was
he
like, death
kind of,
is too
and
good. It's too simple.
yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I think you split the difference nicely because he's in a
Yeah.
cage essentially. And I'm like, he put everyone in a cage. Now he's in the cage.
Yes.
He's still getting
Yes.
admiration, but hopefully he's not leaving that cage.
I mean, because you and I chatted over the years
Yeah.
of the show, that uh like part of the thing that was so appealing to me about making it at all was that I've been watching horror films and psychological thrillers since I was like 11 or 12 years
Right.
old. And I'm so compelled by movies like the one we're talking about, right? And I also am very aware of the problematic things about them. Both things are true at the same time. My reaction doesn't happen to be, I don't think you should do this. My
Right.
reaction is to lean in and try to pull apart the threads of what's so compelling to me about it. And then also what is making me uncomfortable. And, I think I probably had this instinct even when I was sitting in the theater, um, like,
25
dirtbag
years ago.
baby version of me.
Yeah.
But also, now I'm very, very clear when I
Right.
watch it that I'm like, okay, differentiating between how the killer is looking at women and how the film is looking at
Hmm.
women is not something you can get blurry on. And that's something that I learned by doing. And also, frankly, it's like, I don't want to be too gendered about this because there are great filmmakers of all genders who pay
Hmm.
attention to this, but it was a female filmmaker who sat me down and was like, let's really talk about what the male gaze means. That it was Silver Tree, who was our
Okay.
producing director
Yeah.
for a couple of seasons. Because I had been saying male gaze, female gaze. I was just like, let's not objectify these women when he's not objective. When we're in
Right.
his POV, let's objectify because that's him. And when not, I just feel like we lose credibility. This was an ongoing conversation. And then she walked me through what she believes that actually means, where the rubber hits the road when you're shooting, like what's the first frame of the scene. And because that she really drilled that into my head in a great way, I was watching this film and I was thinking to myself, like, is there a way to shoot this nude corpse that doesn't feel
Right.
problematic to me? And maybe there is, but they didn't clear that hurdle for me in the
I
year
think there's a
2000.
way to shoot it. I don't think they took that way
I think
because
that the
they
level of
weren't thinking in those
consciousness,
terms.
yeah, the level of consciousness about like how women's bodies are shown
Right.
on screen was just not as high as it has become in the last 25 years.
Yeah, I mean, even J-Lo, when she's suspended because she's going inside people's minds, her body is suspended, her face is covered, and she's in this skin-tight suit. Now, all the characters are when they're suspended,
Hmm.
but the first time we see what that means, we're just looking at her body, and then the camera pans over her to see there's a second person there, and I'm like, well, that's a choice. That's a male choice. And like for the time, I let it go because I was like,
Hmm.
we all made choices back 25 years ago we might not make today. That's not the worst choice
A
I've
thousand
seen,
percent.
but it's I think an example of like you wouldn't shoot it that way.
An earlier example that stuck right out to me. You go home with her early in the film, like in
Oh
act one
yeah.
of the film. She's smoking a bit of weed to relax. It's a plot point that she can't sleep very well because of this
Yep.
technology. And then she gets up. She's wearing just a button down shirt. She gets up to go to the fridge. And as she leans down into the fridge, she's like angled towards the camera and she's just wearing bikini bottoms.
Right.
And if memory serves, like her body was one of the most iconic things in our pop culture at the time.
Which is
Like
I'm sure part of why they do this. Yeah.
her butt was a revolution, right? I remember, like as a girl with a butt, I remember when that happened, and like, oh my god, there's a movie star with a butt, right? And I I think that Jennifer Lopez had a lot of agency in
Hmm.
terms of how, because she's a A-list movie star, number one on those call sheets. So I don't think that this is an instance where you're looking at an actress necessarily being asked to do something she didn't want to do. I just think if you're gonna do fan service, we'll call it
Hmm.
in that
Hmm.
way, if you're going to give that shot that's going to be in the trailer, I think if you or I were sitting down to make this film today, we would think harder about how to do that didn't feel like
Right.
a man watching
But
Jennifer Lopez lean over.
I also think if she were sitting down today, she would think differently. I think it does. I don't think she was asked to do something she didn't want to do, but I also think like you were just told certain things are okay. And you were just like, okay. And maybe you didn't think about it that hard. Maybe this is like not something I'm worried about. I'm young and like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not naked. But I
Right.
think maybe today you'd be like, you know what though? Could we do that a different way? I want to go back. I just want to ask real quick. I don't know how important this is to anyone other than me. How did you feel about Vince Vaughn in this movie?
I In my memory, he's a comedic actor.
Right.
And so I was like, probably this made perfect sense at the time. To me, it's very emblematic of this thing that happens where if, people occupy a certain space in our culture at the moment. I don't remember questioning it at all when I watched it before, but I watched it this time. My whole level of like tolerance for casting, even how beautiful her hair was, even how
Mm,
obviously barrel curled her hair was in scenes in real life, as
right.
opposed to like the level of frizz that a psychologist with her job would have by the end of it.
Right.
Even that, there's like, I just, my,
I do think the curls were their answer though. I think like they probably wanted her to have like beautiful straight hair and then they were like, but she would be haphazard. And so the answer to that is
was
curls. Because
perfect.
what perfect curls, but still
Uh-huh.
curls because it was, different and we're not taking the time to straighten. I think it's crazy, but a lot of things were crazy.
There's a game I like to play when I'm watching like a film or a TV show that's just like a big production to mount, where there's a million moving pieces and the set pieces are like 53 days of nights plus zombies being shot, right? Um, and what I like to do is I like to watch actors from scene to scene to scene. And I know Vince Vaughn, there are scenes that are so dryly procedural for
Hmm.
him, where he's just like, I need this by the morning, nobody
Right.
rests. And it's just sort of like, okay, this is like, the same as the 1,000 versions of this that I saw on procedural television in that era. But then when you watch him in scenes just with Jennifer Lopez, he opens it up in a way that's really interesting. So what I learned watching that, just as somebody who likes to know these sort of things, is that she was a great scene partner to him
Yeah.
that day, and they had really good professional chemistry. And there's a vulnerability to him in the scenes with her that's really beautiful, right? So his performance, I find it a little uneven, but I'm just like, okay, the scenes where shit really had to go down, like the two of them really made it work.
Yeah, I also made me wonder like the order of shooting because some of those procedural scenes, like maybe those were the first things he shot and maybe he was copying things he had seen before. But I will say that I find his shtick, like his Vince Vaughn comedy-ness, over the top most of the time. Like it's not for me in a lot of movies. And I was really glad that they didn't hire him to bring that to this movie. Because when I saw his name in the credits before I watched the movie, I went, "Oh God." Because I knew what it was about and I was like, I don't know how you bring someone like that into this world. I hope they made him be in this world. And they did.
They were all making a serious film.
Yes,
Everybody
and
was
I
like
but I
good.
wasn't sure when I just saw his name there.
Sean Baker
That's a
walks
barrier
through.
to entry for me because I don't know what he's going to do here. You can't be
Mhm.
funny when there's a guy out there taking women and putting them in cages and filling them with water until they drown. Like,
Right. Spoiler alert. There's a scene where in the dream, the serial killer pulls his intestines out through a hole in his
yeah.
abdomen. This may or may not affect whether someone wants to watch this film. It's the
Eh,
same scene with the beautiful costumes, but he is having his intestines wrapped around some kind of rotisserie chicken pole or something.
right.
I find him hilarious. And
Yeah, well, but that's also because it's like he knows he's in someone else's mind in that scene. And so there's this interesting layer of like, you have to remember that it's not real for your character because if
Mhm.
you think it's real, you could die in this dream and then you could die in life. Or
Yeah.
dream is the wrong word, but it's like how if you die in a dream, you die in life, or so they say. So I enjoyed that. And then I really enjoyed at the end where like he sees the image on the wall and he's like, oh, that's
Yeah.
got it. Like the connection of like, that's where he got it from. I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned this. It got me to see something I had never seen. So that's always fun. But I will say, I did think you were going to come on to talk about poetry. And I
Mm.
was excited because I was like, oh, we could be more literary on this podcast.
I can pivot. Let's pivot.
Well, I mean, listen, I don't know a lot about poetry, but I did
Mhm.
want to just talk to you briefly about whether that's an outlet for you that I know you started doing it when you were before you were writing scripts. So like
Yeah.
if it comes first, I feel like it's a little bit less of an outlet that is something you do just to get out of the script writing mindset. Like you've obviously had a love for it for a long time, but I
Mhm.
am curious about when you are working in such heavy scheduled productions, deadlines, etc., what makes you say I want to write anything else at all, especially something as I think complicated as poetry?
Sometimes I don't want to write anything else at all. Poems are tiny little packages. They can be quite compact. Most of the ones that I write are under a page long, and at least at this point, and they're not. See, poetry has this reputation, I think, for being incredibly academic, almost like a Dan Brown thing where you have to go in and solve the puzzle to understand the poem. I think the way that we teach poems in American schools turns a lot of people off.
Mm,
It's like everybody has the same like Robert Frost poem, the
yeah.
roads diverge, and that's a great poem, but like you can't really perceive it as a great poem when you're in the 10th grade. I think it just feels corny and like, oh, this is like a greeting card. Like my grandmother
Mm.
loves this poem. There are ways we could teach poetry that I think would reduce that barrier for is like you sound like most people I know about
Well, I don't
like you have
dislike it.
sophisticated tastes and somebody put some shit in your head young where like
Yeah.
poetry isn't for you.
It's not that it's not for me. It's not that I dislike it. It's just that it, from whatever reason, when I was writing growing up, I found it hard. I found it the
Yeah.
hardest thing to write. And I don't know what that was. I don't know if it's the brevity of some of them. I mean, I remember like I was pretty good at haikus when I was little, but like, it doesn't really count. And then
Even those forms, they're so like a form like a haiku or a sonnet, which is another thing people are exposed to because
right.
Shakespeare is like, for some reason, we do like 50% Shakespeare into
Yes.
people's
And I
brains for
think
their
that's part of it for me. I don't really like Shakespeare. And
Shakespeare's
so,
fucking hard. The poems, the plays, all of it, right? I
yeah.
speak as somebody who loved Shakespeare immediately and was a theater major in college and studied him very seriously. He's hard. And that's a great way to take an average smart student and tell them poetry is hard and
Mm,
it's not relevant to your life. I think it's because um I was a really I had a lot of stuff going on when I was a teenager emotionally.
mhm.
Like I went through a couple of really hard years in my personal life and as I was sort of growing, and I happened to pick up Sylvia Plath at exactly
Mm,
the right moment. Now her, some of her stuff, because she lived in the like 1960s, it
right.
might feel a little bit rigorous, but it's actually more closely related to the kind of poems people see on Instagram now
Mhm.
than it is to Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Because even just for the sort of simple reason that this is a woman talking about like deeply felt emotion and betrayal, and like it's so visceral that I think
Yeah.
it's an easier way in. it's poets like her. There's a whole, you can just, Google poets with mental illness and you'll get like a whole an
Right.
entire oeuvre of 20th century poetry. But um, I think because I always had thought of myself as a writer, and because my brain does just want to admire and like make little rabbit holes and warren into language for its own sake.
Hmm.
That when I come across a piece of writing and the language is delicious, it does something kind of good to my brain. It makes me want to lean in.
Right.
It's not only poetry. Like one of the most famous examples of this in prose is like the first paragraph of Lolita.
Okay.
Go back and look at that
Yeah.
again. It's basically a poem, and people recite it all the time, right? Because it just, I don't know, it scratches our brain in a good way. The same, it's minus the backing track, it's the reason people love Taylor Swift,
Well, I
right?
was just gonna say, I mean, like if you were talking about how it's taught in school, and I think if kids are understanding like it's basically song lyrics, there are ways to open it up because I think that's when I started to
Mm-hmm.
enjoy it more was when I was like, oh yeah, if you add music to this, and I don't understand music, but that made more sense to me as to like where is this, where can this go? What is the place? And I think that also just comes from when something is short, I have an aversion to it. Like
Really?
if a book is under 300 pages, it loses a star on Goodreads for me because I'm like,
Oh,
that's not
I have
enough.
felt that. Oh,
That's
it's like
not
I've been
enough.
stabbed.
And that's not fair to the writer who spent a lot of time and maybe the story didn't need any more pages. I'm not all stories do, but for me there's just this little thing in my brain that's like because I read fast. Oh, that's
You
only
want immersive
a couple
world building. I
hours.
get it. I do. I
Yeah.
mean, poetry is more like the concentrated version of
Yeah.
things. So it's very rarely that long. I think it would
Right.
be so overwhelming to me to pick up a book of poems of that length.
Of
Um,
course, I think so too,
but
but I think that's I can't quite find the middle ground for myself.
if I were a high school English teacher and I was tasked with introducing people to poetry, I would 1,000% play them All Too Well, 10-minute
Okay.
version, Taylor's
Yeah,
version.
yeah,
And I would play them Jeff Buckley singing Hallelujah
yeah,
by
and
Leonard
just like make
Cohen.
the connection.
Those are poems, right?
Mhm.
I would find, Kendrick Lamar. There's actually no separation.
Yeah.
And so, um, I came to it as a form partly out of like wanting to read it and feel things viscerally, it like I wanted to feel all of the feelings, and
Yeah.
there's often so much just like righteous indignation and deep love, and poems are ways to take like a little bite of the very biggest things like in the universe, fear of death, loss, right? Like really, really, really wanting to bang someone, all of the things, and just it takes a tiny little bite, and
Yeah.
then you just are like flooded with the feelings of the whole thing. But for me, it was in retrospect very much a form of therapy. It was like, I'm feeling all of this stuff
Mm-hmm.
and I just need to get it out of me. I don't even really understand it when it's this horrible, tangled, bad feeling inside of me, but the act of
Mm.
writing it down and in places prettifying it or uglifying it, like doing stuff to it, I understood what was happening inside of me better. And then the next thing that happened is I started to go to open mic nights and I would stand up. I was like 15, 16 years old. I would stand up and I would read them. And I was definitely like comfortable in front of an audience at that age,
That's
like I was
good. Yeah.
performing, and I would see it hit people emotion. I mean, sometimes they were probably like, this girl, but I also sometimes really got them. I could see the tears
Yeah.
there. And that was like, okay, I'm hooked. There's probably a
Mm.
direct line between that and all of the people I've ever killed on any TV show.
Well,
That feeling of, oh, I made them feel something,
yeah, I mean the instant and also like you're getting the validation back that what you're doing is good and right. Like I think that's super important because I was writing as a teenager to get all that stuff out too, but
Yeah,
I was writing it in like scripts and novels that nobody was reading but me. And they were not good. I will say that now because I have them
sure.
saved on like an old hard drive. And I'm like, and it was very similar to what you were saying earlier about like, oh, we've seen this a million times before in different, it was like that. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
mimicking what I was seeing in format because I was trying to teach myself how to write those things. And then the other unhealthy way was I was just catfishing people on AOL chat rooms. So, like realistically, this is why you've built a career on writing. And I am doing
Hmm.
this. But what I love too, I've heard you talk about, I don't know if I've ever heard you talk about a poem that was an influence, but I've heard you talk about certain episodes of Supernatural that you wrote where you had kind of a source material that, as
Yeah.
you said earlier, you gave to writers like Death's Door. I know you were just on Rich and Rob's and you were talking about something for that. Was there any poetry that inspired any particular thing on that show that you can talk a little bit about?
Yeah. One of the poets that I love the most is Rainer Maria Rilke. And when I tell people about him, I say, don't even start with his poetry, start with Letters to a Young Poet, which is a collection of 10 letters that he wrote to a young man who just, I think they had the same teacher or something. So this young man got his address and just like sent this famous poet
Mm.
who was only 27 at the time. It just really blows my mind that he was this wise and it was just like, are my poems good? And they started this back and forth that by the 10th letter covers everything from not being too quick to put your work out there, how you should think about criticism, falling in love, and then the death of this guy's parents. So it got into grief. And so it's kind of like this incredible life manual, beautifully written in 10 short letters. As I mentioned to you, I think in an email, because I was telling you about that book,
Yeah.
I shoplifted it from the
Yeah.
UCLA
I didn't know if
bookstore
you
in
wanted to
college.
say that
Uh-huh.
publicly, but okay.
I was poor. I'm sorry, UCLA. I've given money since then. Um, it was tiny. It was it was one of those like tiny little
Yeah.
books, right? That like you would see
You
them
just put in your
sold up by
pocket.
the cash. Yeah, I wasn't like a klepto, but that day, I don't know, the karma's complicated. But anyway, so Rilke, one of the things he's famous for, he was like he seems like he was a very sensitive and dramatic guy. He saw this older woman who was sort of his patron.
Hmm.
And if you look up pictures of him, he was pretty hot. So I think there was a lot of tolerance of the sensitivity. I don't actually know. Maybe I
Right.
should actually read a full biography of him before I cast aspersions
But
upon him. And so,
this is your projection or opinion. Like
well,
no
so he's
one's
like
saying
this
this is
genius poet,
right.
and then this older woman with her shit together is seeing him and taking care of him. And at one point, she rents him. I think it's she did this for him, but he ends up going to this castle on a hill in a place called Duino, Duino. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Just to like get away and try to write. And then in the course of just a couple of months, he writes 64 poems, which is this incredible output because they are every one of them are amazing. And a lot of them are about angels.
Mm.
And it's this conception. See, I'm answering your question.
Mhm. I knew you
It's this
were.
conception of angels. One of the lines is every angel is terrifying.
Mm.
This very biblical view of angels as these massive, immense powers, much closer to God than we are, unknowable. Just the force of their existence might knock you out or just annihilate you. And I was reading that a lot
Mm.
right around the time I was, Kripke walked into my, like we had this rule for the first 3 seasons of Supernatural. We were going to do demons, but we weren't going to do angels because angels were good. So like, why would we want to do good creatures? We want things to be hard. Like we have no story if the
Yeah.
guys are not the last bastion of hope against the bad.
I'm laughing again because those were always my questions when I was writing about the first. I would ask
Uh-huh.
Kripke all the time, like, so angels are next, right? Because like obviously they're not good, and he would laugh at me. And
I
maybe
mean,
true in the back of his
genuinely,
mind, but
we
at the
held
same
out.
time,
We held out as long as we could. And then in success, I mean, for the children listening to this was a time when you wrote 22 episodes a season. At a point, you need to just escalate. So we were like, okay, next season, we're going to do angels. And when he came into my office at the end of season 3 to talk to me about it. And I'm forgetting the name of the film, but there was a film where Eric Stoltz played an angel in the 90s. And he and I were referencing that film.
I'm
And
gonna go see if I can Google it real quick because
yeah,
I won't remember off the top of my
I
head.
haven't thought about it in so long that
There's The Prophecy.
yes, I think that's
Okay.
it.
Oh, it's a
Um,
horror film too. Interesting. Okay, I haven't seen this one either. Great, you're
I
giving
think it
me
might
more.
be. I don't know. I'm not googling it. So, but I do remember it's Eric Stoltz, and
Yeah.
that season, uh, we our offices were in one of those buildings on the Warner Brothers lot. That's actually just looks like a house. They shot it
Yeah.
for Desperate Housewives and things like that, and And there would be weird sounds coming from the attic sometimes when we were in the offices, and he and I would just be like, "Oh, Eric Stoltz is up there." So whatever that movie is, I think at one point, it's been so long. I hope I even am remembering this right, but an angel like kind of crash lands into the story, and so as we were talking about how do we do angels, make them really powerful, but not help the boys too much,
Right.
and immediately I was like, oh, it's this biblical conception of angels that Rilke writes about. And for people who like want to touch that but don't necessarily want to jump right into Rilke, oh, it won't hurt you. Read some Rilke. But Guillermo del Toro loves to do this version of
Hmm.
angels. There's even an angel like this, I think, in Hellboy at one point. This angel who's like a million eyes in her wings, like an angel of death.
Hmm.
And I saw a promo for Frankenstein, and I think we might get another one. I'm not sure, but he is as in this is like a I think it's a frequency that he and I share. I get to say this though I've never met him because angels are horror creatures. I
Right.
think they come down, even in the Bible, they come down and they just like wrestle you, and you're like, am I dying? Like God sent you to kill me right now? Like they're not, or they come to a virgin and they're just like, yo, you're pregnant.
Right.
It's weird. They do weird shit. And so our sort of hallmark version of angels is to the old story as maybe children cartoon fairy tales are to the original fairy tales, right? The originals are much darker, and our culture over time sanitized them a little
Yeah.
bit or made them less fearsome.
Yeah.
So that's a when I was working on Supernatural, I would show up a few minutes early. I would close the door to my office and I would write a poem every morning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. This was before I became a showrunner and I stopped having time to
Well,
do that.
so that goes back to my where's the time? I mean, listen,
Mhm.
I know you have a book of poems coming out. Are any
Yeah.
of those poems in there?
From that time, no,
Okay.
no. Although, if you watch the pilot, the first episode of You, there's a poetry reading
Yeah.
in, all of that kind of, that's a classic. I was writing that with Greg Berlanti, and he was like, we have to do a pass and make Beck this female lead. We have to get more personal, give her more texture. And so, because this is what writers do, I can make her more like me. She could be a poet. And so the poem that she reads and she bombs at the open mic night with it, I wrote that when I was probably in college, something like that. Yeah.
Well, I think you can probably sell the poems you wrote at Supernatural just under like the title of poems I wrote at Supernatural, and it would be a bestseller. Like regardless of what they're about, just
Oh,
because.
really? I should dig them back up. They must be somewhere. I don't know. I mean, it speaks to what you're saying, which is that, I really love my job. I love writing scripts. And there are moments when I have finally jumped through the 5 billion hoops of solving, the puzzles and then writing the outline and then getting all the approvals where I'm in a scene and I can be in the language and the emotion. But that's like the last 10% of
Mhm.
being a screenwriter. So much of the work is more mathematical. And even when it is you're swimming in the art, it is quite modular and segmented. You don't really get to just run and dive in and swim around. So for my own mental health and for my own to stay in touch, I think of it this way: inside of me, there's this like little artist who predates all of my career, who predates even my understanding that there was such a thing as screenwriting.
Mhm.
And that inner artist has done so much for me for the last couple of decades. And every time I say to her, okay, but we have to now rewrite this so that the studio likes it, she just helps me do the best possible version of that. Sometimes she does nothing but help me rewrite stuff to make it cheaper for 3 months in a row. So the least I can do is
Yeah.
go, okay, now we're going to sit down and we're just going to do it to do it. I'm not going to try to sell it. I don't care how big the audience is.
Mm.
This is just me and you swimming around because this is important for its own sake. And at the end of the day, the fact of my being an artist, just being born and being this way, does not exist in service to being productive, having a job, capitalism, career, reputation. No, 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 no. Art, the soul is here for its own joy. So that's why poetry.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. That is a great segue into your newsletter, which I want to talk about. But I have one more supernatural question,
Mm-hmm.
because you were talking about recognizing that angels are these little horror people or creatures.
Yeah.
um, very early, you were there when heaven was also introduced. Like it wasn't just angels, it was also this idea of heaven, but you were not there for the finale when we really kind of saw, I would argue, the true heaven. Do you agree with what the show has decided the true, or maybe agree is unfair, but how do you feel about what the show decided the true heaven of that show was?
I fundamentally, I mean, I was born and raised Jewish, but the sort of Judeo-Christian angels, demons, God, even conception of supernatural, it works incredibly well for that show, which is like fundamentally in the lineage of The Exorcist and horror movies like that. But I don't experience the universe that way.
Okay.
So it's like heaven. Well, I'm pretty sure heaven and hell are here, and we're in both of them right now.
Oh, I
You
don't
know?
even mean it that way. I mean
Yeah.
for the show itself, like because you had written versions of it and you had certainly written these characters for so many years, and then we see kind of the answer to where they end up and what that is.
Hmm.
If how you feel about that
I
answer.
am against giving the answer.
I
that's my.
know.
That's my. I don't know. It's like for some like I even going. We're going to hell. It's like I can wrap my head around that if I'm going to like one city block of hell and then I can
Mm.
explain why it looks this way to these characters and I'm not actually pinning it down that this is what it would be. Like I have been reading I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Catabasis, this book that just came out by the author of The Poppy Wars, R.F. Kuang. Um,
Oh.
and she wrote a magician's-y kind of book called Babel.
Oh, I didn't know
Uh,
that. Okay, cool.
Yes, and catabasis or catabasis. Sorry,
It it
it's
looks
Greek.
it looks
It's
like how, the first way you said it looks correct to me.
catabasis. Is about two graduate students or postgraduate students in magic, um, in England, going to hell to retrieve their advisor because she needs a recommendation letter.
Oh my
and
God.
and the concept of hell in that is sort of Dante-esque in a way. There are circles of
Hmm.
hell, but it also happens to look quite a lot like Oxford and Cambridge. You know, it's
Sure.
like
Yeah.
very it's a university campus frequently or a library. And she goes to great pains early in the thing to be like, you know, people who are down there who are going through whatever trials they're going through to try to like level back up again or whatever. They're like, well, of course it looks like a campus to you. So I don't
Yeah.
know. That's as much as you can pin me down on
That's
the answer. The
fair. Also,
celestial, the hellish, the whatever, you know.
yeah.
And I also am like a little bit like it's like the choices people make at the end of the series that they're making.
Hmm.
So they're so huge,
Hmm.
and I just like respect um uh and I'm just saying this generally. This is no specific opinions about Supernatural or any show. I just respect the magnitude of that pressure.
Yeah.
Having been there a few times now, where it's like, oh, we're gonna decide how to end this, and it's it's hard to clear your head and just like do the job in the face of that because you feel the weight of all of that expectation, you know. So
Yeah.
that long train of showrunners who came after me did a good job on that
I
show.
will also say, like, they ended it for now, and I don't even just mean Supernatural. I mean a lot of these shows. Like,
Yeah.
we thought Supernatural was ending in season five at a certain point, and then it
Mm-hmm.
didn't, and then you reset it. And so it was like, yes, it's been off the air now for a few years, but we see all of these other shows that have also been off the air for a long time come back. So what do you have to end it in a way that feels good for you and for the show you're making at the time, and hopefully not worry about like
The
what
IP.
may happen in 10 years. Yeah, like someone else has to like undo something or whatever, which is a problem that nobody had maybe 20 years ago. So maybe even 10 years ago. So like that's pressure I can't even
I
imagine.
mean, people have all, for certainly for as long as I've been in the business, it's like often you don't know if you're writing a season finale or a series
True. Yeah,
finale. So
that's
the levels of uncertainty and wanting to cliffhang, but wanting to be satisfying and not wanting to paint yourself into a corner, even if you're pretty sure it's the end, that's probably predates our birth.
yeah, that is
Um,
that is true. Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, I mean, I'm gonna sound like a poet for 1 second when I say this, but I think we like come to television a little bit because we want the comfort and the escapism of these answers. Here's what happens after you die, right? Which is like in a certain way, it's all horror. So often it's things from beyond the grave. And they're scary, but I'm almost like, there's something beyond the grave. Thank you. Like it's the void, it's the nothingness that scares me. And I both love to cross to the other side of the veil in telling these stories and also feel a responsibility to try to find a way to keep some of the mystery too. Like
Yeah.
making too pat of an answer, I feel like doesn't respect your audience to the extent that you could, where you could be like, yeah, you and me are in the same boat where we don't know what happens after you die. So here's what I'm going to say. But I also just want to like wink at you a tiny bit to say, isn't it incredibly painful that we don't, first of all, isn't it incredibly painful that we don't know if fairies are real? I'm really bummed that I don't have proof. I write about them all the time. I would like to
Yeah.
know if they're real.
Right.
Never mind death, never mind the reaper, never mind the afterlife, heaven. Like, would I like to? Yes, I would like to know. And those people who are like, take it on faith, I'm like, that just makes it worse.
Right.
So if
Right.
you'll be able to discern that thread of barely contained frustration in probably all of my television writing, and definitely it runs through the collection of poems that comes out next
Mhm.
year,
Okay.
where it's just like, I just want answers to these things that I can't have answers to. And then what I end up writing about is the feeling of not being able to have these answers.
Yeah, but you are willing to give answers in other ways because this is the
Mm-hmm.
whole point of this Substack. Like I said at the start of our conversation, like you would do Q&As on social media for years. You have a
Yes.
YouTube series, which I didn't mention at the top, but like, so you are very good at pulling people up the ladder behind you, whether it's in your room or just like people you don't know who are asking questions online.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, a newsletter is a big time suck and like a big commitment.
Yes.
What made you say I want to start a newsletter for I would argue advice
Yeah.
versus writing a book?
I mean, I'm not averse to the idea of writing a book, but I like the interaction of doing it in this cadence and a little piece at a time and being able to be responsive to what
Mm.
people actually want to know. Because it is some of the essays, maybe a too academic term, posts,
I
pieces.
think you can say essays.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
the one
Some
that
of,
just came out feels that way because it's like I'm setting up what I'm going to be doing here, but I'm also like talking through like you have kind of a thesis. You're talking through a specific topic, and
yeah,
like spoil it for everybody. I don't know if they can get it now if they didn't subscribe before it went out. I don't know if there's like a sort of a
you can
back.
just go on there and subscribe.
Yeah, but I don't know if the first one is it available to people if they.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, okay. Well,
forever.
all I was saying was like 'cause there's a piece in it where you're talking a lot about like kind of dispelling ideas of how people write
Mhm.
and giving kind of your version of it, and I feel like that feels like an essay to me because it is.
Yes. And these are things I have actual answers to.
Okay.
I cannot tell you, Danielle, where you go after you die,
No,
but
I
I
wasn't
can
asking
tell
that.
you how to improve the outline before you send it to the studio.
Sure.
And I can talk a lot about how to handle being nervous, public speaking, interviews, podcast, because I
Yeah.
have always had very bad stage fright. So I
Yeah, you
both,
said that in your email, but I was like, but you just said you were doing poetry readings out loud
yeah,
as a teenager. How do you have stage fright?
I mean, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but like the pushing through to connect, pushing
Yeah.
through to be on that platform and to share the thing just feels right to me. I just sometimes and I can't predict when, will suffer a little bit and have to adjust because
Yeah.
I'll suddenly get scared of what I'm doing, but I don't know if this sounds psychotic, but I just feel compelled to do it. I enjoy performing and I sometimes have almost paralyzing stage fright. So I wrote
But
like
that's the answer.
2,000 words.
The answer in there is you're pushing through it. Like that's, I think, the
Mm-hmm.
difference. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is true of many, many, many people. And I've talked to so more actors have told me they have stage fright than don't. It's actually kind
Mhm.
of a myth. There are people who are always There's a few, certainly every psychopath, but also just some people who are so comfortable. But more,
Right.
you know, people are complicated and crunchy.
Yeah.
And I actually I know a lot of performers who it all just evaporates when they're playing a character, but when
Mhm.
they have to be themselves, which is theoretically most of my job, when I'm coming into
Yeah.
pitch, I don't like the idea that I'm playing the character of the person who's going to run this show. I'd rather just like talk to you but that does make it harder. I don't have anything to hide behind.
Hmm.
So that's an example of something I feel like an expert in because I've pitched a lot pretty successfully. And often there is like a lot of secret flop sweat. I think secret flop sweat. Yeah,
Okay. Well, what I will say, there is a piece in your first newsletter where you're talking about like the anxiety critical mass, about like that
yes.
sometimes you just have, you're stuck for a few days, whether you want to call it, oh my God, I just lost the word.
Like writer's block.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a
That's a
fun
hilarious thing.
experience.
That's
Yes,
like
I lost the word
Freud.
for writer's block, which is okay. So yeah, so sometimes you just are stuck for 3 days, writer's block, if you want to call it that. But then
Mm-hmm.
like what sounded to me gets followed by kind of writing binges where you write everywhere that you can. And
Mm-hmm.
it sounded a lot like you're trying to give people the permission, like it's okay to not be regimented, to not sit at a desk. I love that. I want to ask you the opposite though, because for people, and I will speak for myself, for people like me who can't deal with that kind of like chaotic maybe
Yeah.
schedule, like I do feel like I need to work in a more regimented way. Is there a suggestion for how to break through that mindset so that you're not getting stuck and then just stopping?
Um, Part of the point of that piece is that if you do better sitting at a desk, if you do better with your bullet journal, then do that.
Okay.
And this, I wrote it from the perspective of someone who's more scattered and writes in binges when I'm not, actively running a show in an office, because
Yeah.
that's the truth of me. And because I think we see so much stuff about productivity and we
Yeah.
see so much stuff about like doing it better. And I felt the need to kind of respond to it because I just know so many people who are messy and they think that that's something they must eventually excise. And I'm like,
Mm.
or not. And I think that, like, in its spirit, that advice is the same if you are somebody who needs a certain, whatever your structure looks like. Because what I'm describing is a form of structure. Like, I can't
That's true.
actually,
Yeah.
like, I can't fool myself or any of my loved ones anymore when I'm like, oh God, I don't know if I can do this. And they're like, but you've been doing this for 20 years. Like, I'm pretty sure you're going to figure it out. Like, I actually have yet to see you give the
Right.
money back. Right. So, but I'm like, but this is totally real. They're like, yeah, we feel bad for you. Do you want us to cook you dinner? Like, I have loved ones who are very sweet, but they won't actually let me get away with that. But that's my process, is what I'm
Mm.
saying. My
Hmm.
process involves getting stuck in that particular way. I do think that what separates, and I think you'll probably agree, but you tell me, like, what separates professional writers fundamentally from writers who do it when the spirit moves them and maybe put it down, right?
Hmm.
Is that we push through
Yeah.
and getting stuck. And in fact, we start to understand that getting stuck is not a coincidence.
Hmm.
It could mean a number of things. It could mean you need a nap. It could mean that what you've written so far has a flaw in it and you haven't found it yet. It could mean that like a better idea is on the way, but
Yeah.
you don't, as in all the stuff we talked about earlier in this conversation,
Yeah.
you don't have access to every part of your particular hard drive that is working right now. That when you're in the creative process, whether you're writing an article or
I
a
wouldn't call
script,
that creative. That I think that is the main difference here is
really,
you're right. When I was reading your piece, I was trying to apply it to myself as a writer. And then I was thinking like, well, when I was writing however many articles a week, 50, whatever.
sure.
It was a lot. It was bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like I couldn't do what you were doing because of the volume, the output, the like
Mm-hmm.
format, etc. But I think if I then stood back and was like, but what was I doing when I once was a creative writer? And it
Yeah,
was coming from not capitalism, but it was coming from something that I wanted to just, a story I just wanted to tell.
right.
Think that's where I was seeing the divide, and I think that's why I got in my head a little bit about it because yeah, I do think they're different. I'm not saying it like there's no creativity that goes into journalism or any other articles, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a different type of writing, and I also would argue that like because of the deadlines that we have, like if you're on the news beat, God help you.
I mean, but
Like you have deadlines. I'm not saying you don't have deadlines, but like your deadlines are creative and ours
mm-hmm.
just like you have to be the first to get this out and correct. And oh, that person died 5 minutes ago. Now you're
Holy
fine.
shit.
Do you know what I mean? Like that kind
I
of
do. I mean, I would say I both like, I hear you, and I'm always incredibly impressed by the cadence of the kind of work you do. When you're in
Well, I didn't do that,
production,
thankfully, but people
when,
around
no,
me.
I get it. I get it. And like, I've like the reporters that I've now seen like time and again over the year, like like you in the course of my career, I'm so impressed by it's so good, so fast. And I'm just like, shit, I actually see a lot in common. Listen, when you're in production
Yeah,
and you
you're
have
working
written,
fast.
a thing and it shoots tomorrow or
Yeah.
whatever, do you know what I mean? Or in
Hmm.
order to get to the next step of your job, you have to get this out in the next
Hmm.
3 hours. I am leaning on a lot of the same skills you are. I'm just like, I've written 500 of these, 5,000 of these scenes. And so right now I'm just going to plug this in with the moves that we decided needed to change. And I'm not like leaning back and inviting, the muse to like,
Hmm.
that's not the daily
Yeah.
life of a television
No,
writer.
no, no.
The muse is welcome to catch up, but
Well,
we are fucking running.
when you're writing the pilot, the muse is there.
I know. And it's so irritating because it takes me so fucking long to write a pilot. I
But
just took
that's what's
3 months
nice
on a
about that
rewrite.
process. Like you
Yeah.
can do that. That's what I mean. I think that's where I kept
The,
thinking
the
that.
job is so different. Like when I'm, doing the things I have to do to take $500,000 out of a script
Right,
today,
right, of course.
that's not the same job as creating a world
Right.
for a new TV show. And that should take a little bit longer. Now, if they called me and they said, we need it tomorrow because, literally Helen Mirren will star if you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. You'd
and
figure it
I
out.
will, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it because I have the other muscle. But if
Mhm.
I, you know what I mean? And I'll probably write more about this because I find it really interesting.
Yeah, I think
Like
you
all of
should.
these things are true at one. The thing that you and I are talking about right now is the 10,000 hours thing a little
Yes.
bit, where it's like, yes, there is to some extent art in what both of us do. You could argue that like I get to hold the artist
Mhm.
banner more frequently than
A
you
little
do,
bit.
but there's also a tremendous amount of craft.
Hmm.
And a lot of the stuff that I'm writing for the Substack to try to take some of the pressure off of screenwriters that you're talking about is to say, you no, you actually can't control if the
Yeah.
thing you're writing today is going to be brilliant. And you also can't actually control, there's no correlation between how I feel about something today and how good it actually is. That's what's really upsetting to me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will think something sucks and it will have felt awful to write. And then I'll go
Yeah.
back to it and be like, this is actually really good. Like, why doesn't this like in any way relate to how I'm feeling? Damn it. Right. This
Mhm.
doesn't give me that. But I like to point out that what we can control is just practicing.
Yeah.
You just write a lot and you get better. And on my worst day, I write a competent script. On my worst day with the, least inventive lines I've ever put in an actor's mouth, it's never going to sink below a certain level of
Right.
competency because I have 20 or 30,000 hours at this point. And so what I encourage people to do is to see the long game.
Yeah.
A lot of the newsletters are that in different forms. And I think it applies just as much or more to people who do the kind of work that you do, where you have to like figure out how you're going to do it, and then you have to do it, and then you have to do the
Right.
next one. And there's 1,000 tiny decisions that you're making, even as people are talking to you. I can see it behind your eyes sometimes where you're like,
Well, yeah, because I have
oh,
a way I want to ask, a thing I
huh,
want to ask, but then I'm like, but I have to follow up on what you're saying because that's better. But then this is freer form. This is, a little bit looser in terms of time, because I already know we're over what I said we would be. But like when you're a working journalist and you're given a 5-minute junket spot,
oof,
no creativity. There's no artistry.
yeah,
You better hope you get your question out fast and they don't take 4 minutes to answer it because you got like a list of other questions. It
yes,
is, I mean, I stopped doing junkets for a long time for that reason. I was like, I can't get anything of value out of this, and neither can you, meaning like the studio, the network. Like it's a
it's so
waste of your
hard.
talent's time. I would rather like if you can you carve out, 15, 20 minutes, I will
Mm-hmm.
pare my stuff down, like we'll do something a little bit more in depth, but even 15, 20 minutes is hard for like a feature interview, but that's not about me. But
By the
you,
way,
I
yeah, we
used
can.
to
I'll
do
just
that
come
to
back and
you
we'll
all the
just complain
time.
about junkets.
Yeah. Oh, but I mean, I used to do that to you all the time. I'd be like, they'd be like, you have 10 minutes. And I'd be like, ugh. And you said
I
something
don't
really
like it
interesting
either.
and I
That's a lot
can't
of
follow up.
pressure. I don't like it. I don't like it. And I don't like just giving you yeah, we're on the same page about that. But
Everyone is.
yeah, that's like that's I think that's something that like if I were starting today
Yeah.
and I were looking for sources of helpful information, I would want to find Sera Gamble's Substack where
I
she
was just
says,
gonna say that. Yeah.
don't worry so much about whether it's good. Like your relationship to that word is going to change tremendously over the next 5 years of your life.
Yeah.
Writing is a practice. You'll find your relationship to it. The thing you need to know is not a single day of your work is wasted.
Mm.
All of it will contribute to increasing your skill, your craft, and you'll be able to lean on that no matter how you're feeling on a Tuesday, which is sadly adult life, right? And it's certainly the life of someone with a job. There are days where it feels like magic and days where it feels like work. So practice more. So people are like, how do I write another script? Sorry, writer's right. Sorry.
Yeah. And you're not
Yeah.
sorry though. Like if you want to write, then it's not a bad thing to hear. You know what I mean? It's just like sometimes it's a
Yes.
little daunting of where to start, but like that's where I'm gonna go back to what you were saying of the like if you're stuck, but then things might come out if you're writing in a coffee shop, if you're writing in a bar, if you're writing in the tub, like you don't have to
Yeah.
focus on one thing. So you have, I know you have a couple of upcoming ones where you're writing about things for people specifically in the industry. Like you have things that are tips or advice for people getting TV jobs, what happens in a writer's room. Is there anything that you feel you want to tease specifically about like this upcoming one is one that I don't know if this is a fair question, but like I'm super proud of.
I mean, I believe in leading with something you're proud of. So the essay that we're talking about, which in this period in time is coming out next week, but by the time it's up, probably by the
So it
time
will
people
be
are
up because
listening.
yeah, we're recording on the
Yeah.
day that your first one launched. So this will be up because it'll be up.
Right. About embrace in praise of the sustainable mess, about embracing just the way you do it, including embracing the cost. But I also wanted a mix of really practical stuff. I have a series about just things I do to make a pilot better. And I have one about literally like the style I use when I'm writing a script to make it more readable and make it less likely that they'll put it down or check their phone. I think about that a lot. Interview tactics. And I get pretty specific. It's like we always get asked the same question: Where are you from? What TV have you liked lately? Like, were you always a writer? And so I kind of take apart how you can use those questions to help actually get the job. And then every now and then, there's this thing. And I think one of the reasons I'm doing this Substack is because this is something that's very alive for me as a question and an inquiry. And I'm just getting into it. So I'm inviting people like, hey, come along for the ride with me. It's that we we live in this late stage capitalist show. I don't know what this, we're in the age of enshittification in many ways, and the pressure to perform, to make a product, to make content,
Right.
to use your gifts to serve as a worker. It's like never been higher. And I have the incredible good fortune of like the thing that I do as basically a spiritual practice, writing, is also the thing that pays my bills.
Hmm.
But because of that, I have had to pull those two things apart. Like I have had real experiences of burnout. I think it's unlikely that anyone who has gotten to my stage in a career and has, run the stuff at the same time that I, didn't
Right.
have a moment where they're like, sabbatical and a nap, guys.
Right.
And I want to talk about that specifically because I think that's something, whether you're a graphic designer, or whatever it is you're doing, I think that it scratches at us
Yeah.
that like we need to find a way to include both. And I never want to speak from my position of privilege and be like, here's what you should do, guys. Because you know what? I used to flip burgers at McDonald's. I know how tired you are after that.
Right.
But I do want to, it's sort of what you said. I want to give a lot of specific permission. You
Hmm.
get to do the weird thing because it's burning inside you and you don't know why. When I took a sabbatical, which I did
Hmm.
recently, I shut Final Draft, which is the screenwriting software on my computer. And I was like, you don't get to open that for a while.
Hmm.
Because at this point in my career, any idea I have, the most immediately monetizable version of that idea is a script. There
Right.
is almost no idea I could have that I wouldn't call my agents and they'd be like, yes,
Yeah.
that's a TV show or a feature. And I just wanted to take it off the table. Again, I had money in the bank. I do not have children in
Sure.
private school, but I was able to be like, you know what, 20 years into this thing, what what would I write if there was zero pressure and zero eyes on, just like if I had the same kind of relationship to
Yeah.
writing that I did when I was 16.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, tiny little bits of that scattered among how to talk to studio executives.
Hmm. And maybe I would say, most importantly, as you're teasing this next issue, Franklin, your dog, beautiful photo of you and Franklin in this issue. So, not just for the writers out there, also for the dog lovers.
Would you like to take credit for that idea?
No. What?
I
Why?
because I feel like you are one of the number one proponents in our entire industry of featuring the dog.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, like for you sticking it in the newsletter, I didn't know you were going to do that. No,
Oh no, but the
the
original
photo,
photo.
yeah. So the photo for anyone listening, I used to run the Emmy extra editions at Variety. It was part of my very long list of responsibilities at Variety, and we had a feature called Writer's Office where we would go to photograph showrunners, writers, et cetera, producers in their office. And anyone that I knew that had a dog, I was like, please bring your dog. Not everyone would, but some
Mm,
people did. And I would say, like, it's so funny, especially I mean, it fits perfectly in the essay, just where you're talking about like you can write from anywhere, but here's this beautiful photo in an office. Because when we were doing that column, it's not a column, it's a feature, but when we were doing that feature, there would be people that I would invite to do it.
mhm.
And their rep would say, okay, but we got to rent them an office. And I'm like, no,
Oh
you
wow.
don't. I will go wherever. Like I went to someone's house once, like you don't have, but there were certain people that ended up saying, no, it needs to look a certain way from the studio or network perspective. And
Mm,
they would
mhm.
fill an empty office for the photo shoot. And I was like, I don't like this. I'm perpetuating a lie. I am part of the Hollywood problem.
I
Anyway,
mean, that you came to the magician's office. That
I
was
did.
real.
That was real.
It was a little cleaner than usual the day you came, though. I mean, that's the point of the piece. Is like, the thing that's true is that my dog is bigger and foregrounded in the photo, which is correct. That's the right
I
order
did
of the
not say
hierarchy.
that that's how that should be, though. You
Mm,
guys sat on the
That's just
couch.
how, yeah, because Frank was
Yeah.
like, I don't know, he just like really loves a camera.
Yeah.
He's
As
like
he should.
that, is he should, befits his station. But I wanted to point out, like,
Mm.
you know, I know people know this at this point, but it goes beyond just that I had an hour and a half of hair and makeup and that I had picked my outfit and that there was lighting in the office and we picked the angle and all of those things. It's also just like that person, Sera Gamble, the showrunner, who even gets to make the rule that her dog comes to the office, by the way, much
Mm.
less all of the other things. That's a way that I work when I am at a job like that. And yeah, when that's the way that I work, I do show up at 9 a.m. I do have my hair done because other humans will be looking at me. And that's not the whole story by any means. And there's no particular reason that you have to work the way that Sera Gamble, the showrunner, works. If what works for you, what gets the shit done, is working the way Sera Gamble, the 16-year-old poet who's just not quite 16 anymore, still works on the floor of her office in her pajamas.
Honestly, I feel like that is a cry to everybody who owns a business and is making people come back to the office post-COVID. That is what we want to hear and not what we are hearing. But
Mm.
we'll see where it goes. Thank you so much for coming on. I've had you longer than I said that I would. Before you go, I always like to tell people where to find the things that we talked about. So first, I want to ask you, where do you want people to pre-order your book? It's called Our Lady of the Sick Girls. It's
Mhm.
available for pre-order now, right?
It is not yet.
Okay, so
It is
we don't know
coming
yet.
out. Yes, because it won the Wolfson Press Poetry Chapbook Prize, and which means that it's going to be a short book. But I'm just going to need you to dig in.
That's okay. I do think it's different when it's a book of poems versus like a narrative story.
We'll see.
That's okay.
You're allowed to be like, this is too skinny. I don't want to read it. But
No, I'll read it. And
uh,
the reason I asked about where you prefer to pre-order is because obviously, like, there are some places that like
yes,
really give the writers the right money that they should get. So maybe we'll just have to check back with you on.
yes, check back with me because since it was a prize that I won, there's a long lead time. It'll be next fall that it comes out, but I will talk about it on all the social channels. You can find me at Sera Gamble on Instagram and then now Sera Gamble at Substack.
I was just going to say, yeah, everyone, if you want to subscribe, seragamble.substack.com. And then we did talk obviously about the Cell that is not streaming. So you have to pay a little bit of money to rent it. It's at Apple TV, Prime Video, places like that. But I think after this conversation, hopefully you want to. So thank you all for listening and or watching. This has been made possible by Pop Culture, the podcast, and I'll see you at the next one.